Hey guys, it's Bucklevi here for League Top 10, and I am happy to present to you Wukong first impressions video of the Monkey King, Riot's new 6300 IP and 975 RP champion. Now, we've seen quite a slew of these 975, 6300 RP champions recently, so this should be an easy gauge for you guys to see whether or not you want to spend your RP or IP on this guy or any of the other previous billion 6300, 975 RP champions we've had. Now, Wukong, being a bruiser melee damage dealer, has quite a few little tricks and tips up his sleeves that he uses in combat, and we're going to be talking a little bit about those and just see how he stacks up versus other melee type champions. Now, to really easily break down what Wukong and who he actually stacks up against the easiest, you can kind of compare him, I guess, to if Garen and Lee Sin, and yeah, both of them had like a love child, gay love child. That's pretty much what Wukong is. And if he had, grown out hair, and it was super hairy, that's Wukong in a nutshell. He's essentially Lee Sin with Lee Sin type abilities with no skill shots, simply just clicking on spells, and Garen's ultimate in a way with an Alistar kind of knockup. Now, this all makes for, on paper, a really interesting champion, and I have to say that he's pretty fun to play. Although I wouldn't say he is overpowered or underpowered, I would say that he's fairly fun to play. But there are some key issues with him, notably his ultimate, that kind of make him fall short of the full 6,300 price if you're going to pay that. So let's talk about those first, okay? So the problems that he has are notably two of his abilities, his Q and his R. His Q, which does a flat attack damage modifier, or rather, sorry, a flat auto attack modifier, does a flat amount of damage and reduces armor. On paper, that looks great. It's a little boost to your attack, and it also reduces armor. However, the 30% of armor reduction that it actually incurs on the target is on the base armor of a target. What this means is that if a target has 60 armor base, it reduces 30% of that at max rank. We're not talking 30% of like 200 armor. We're talking 30% of 60 armor. So as the game progresses, your Q becomes less and less effective as far as armor penetration. On top of this, you also have the fact that the Q is only flat damage. So at max rank, it only does an extra 150 damage to your auto attacks. Now, this may seem like a lot, but as your games drag on past the 30-minute mark, this becomes less and less and less damage. There's no kind of attack multiplicative from your actual additional attack damage or anything. It's simply a flat 150. So this translates into an ability that's pretty decent early game, but as the game draws on, this really becomes nothing more than a simple auto attack steroid with little to add when people have a ton of armor. So that is one issue with him. The other issue stems from his ultimate. Now, when people were thinking of his ultimate, they thought, wow, a Garen type spin to win ultimate and knocks people up. And in my mind, I thought it was going to knock people up multiple times with an internal cooldown, similar to how Udyr works. For those of you that don't know, Udyr, his bear stance stuns individuals, but has an internal cooldown of how often you can stun. So I was thinking that perhaps you could knock someone up and then, 2 seconds later, knock them up again if you're still on them with your ultimate. That is not the case. It knocks solely one time up. And in addition to this, the damage is quite low. Now, the damage obviously spikes higher if you're in an AoE setting, but in a 1v1 setting, it's actually more beneficial to simply ultimate on someone to knock them up, perhaps to keep them from escaping or to cut them off. Once knocked up, cancel the ultimate by hitting R again and proceeding with your normal auto attacks along with your Q. Because of course, during your ultimate, you cannot Q a target, and you cannot even perform your basic auto attacks, which might result in more damage. So this was fairly disappointing, and it really requires a lot of attack damage to be stacked on him for his ultimate to do more damage late game than you would expect from simple auto attacks. In addition to all of this as well, one thing I didn't note is that you are susceptible to stuns, to slows, to any type of CC, silences even. All of this cancels out his ultimate. It is not like Garen's ultimate, who he will still continue to spin despite being silenced, despite being slowed, and despite being stunned. So he is very susceptible to CC, as you'll see in a couple of these videos. And for that reason, it's really hard for him to either A, chase down a target, or B, once engaged with a target, to peel away if the other target has successive CCs, like a Rumble Slow, for example. So, really this means that he really depends on his teammates to set up the ganks for him. Now, he is not a jungle type champion. He does not fare in the jungle quite well, which means that when we're talking about setting up ganks, we're talking about in team fights, we're talking about in ganks in separate lanes. He really needs someone in his lane to either stun a target, to slow a target, or some way tie up a target so that he can get in there and do the damage he needs. Wukong is great at running away. He is really good at using his W, which creates the clone and allows him to go invisible, to juke enemies, as well as possibly using his E to actually attack farther minions away, similar to Akali's ultimate, and to escape danger. This makes him great at weaving, ducking, and maneuvering to get away, but when it comes to keeping a target locked down, he has no ability other than the initial application of his ultimate that can keep a target in place without obviously items. So having a duo partner, someone say Leona or another person with a stun, say Scion or something like that, really is beneficial for him to get kills early on. Now, I really feel that he needs a good early game in order to succeed late game. You may have seen Freak talk about making Wukong more tanky, going into the defensive masteries, getting really, really tanky items, etc. I don't really agree with this so much. I really feel that attack damage masteries and attack damage runes are his route to go with. Going going more, offensive with a little bit of utility seems to be the right spot for him. His passive provides a good amount of MR and armor early in team fights that you can really take advantage of, and I feel like later in the game is when you actually can build up your armor and those from items, not so much masteries. I really saw a improvement in my overall damage and my overall offensiveness by going obviously into the defensive tree early on. So anybody with the stun, like I said, makes a great laning partner. I don't really feel he is a solo champion simply because of the things I stated. He's really susceptible to CC, and his ultimate is really not something that you take someone one-on-one with unless you're super fed. Once he is decently fed, he can transition, there we go, into mid to late game really well, and again, he has to be fairly fed early on to do so. This is why I also took Flash and Exhaust as my summoner spells, because I felt like this allowed me to catch up with another enemy who has some type of gap distance initiator, like Tristana jump or something like that, so I can keep up with them, slow them down, and make up for the fact that I'm not able to chase characters as well as I would wish to be. Now, usually when you have a champion that can either go a bruiser or an assassin, say Lee Sin, they are great chasers. They're great people that can keep up with another champion easy, like I've said, but also they don't need as much farm as, say, your AD carry, your ranged carry. We see a lot of people like Renekton, a lot of people like Jarvan, and a lot of people like Garen not get so much actual gold early on and do fine mid to late game. I really feel that if Wukong doesn't farm or get some decent kills early on, he transitions really poorly into late game. Due to the fact that his Q doesn't scale off of anything, his E is really the only thing that scales decently off of AD, and his R does scale decently off of AD, but you're more benefited to just obviously auto tag. So for this reason, he's less of a bruiser type champion and more of an assassin type champion. As far as items go, I've mixed around with builds and messed around, not only mixed, but messed around with builds, and I found that going something like a Last Whisper, Merc Treads, Trinity Force is kind of like a core part of his build. After those things, I was able to play around with defensive items. You'll see Force of Nature being taken. You'll also see things like me trying to go Frozen Mallet if I wasn't going Trinity Force in one of the builds. Things like that really translated well for Wukong, getting that, you know, defensive items later in the game as opposed to earlier in the game, because he really needs that brunt force early in the game so he can transition well, like I said. Now, after those items, you can generally just get what's necessary. I've heard people go Atmez and Warmogs. Personally, from the games I played so far, I have not gotten all item slots filled, so I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly what I would recommend. Although Atmez plus Warmogs is a good route, you can also go, of course, Bloodthirster like it was recommended. Big AD steroid items are really what you should shoot for if you're going more assassin-like. And again, I felt the assassin/damage dealer role was much better than the tank role because of the fact that he doesn't have very many abilities that translate into being a good tank type champion or a good damage stoker. He feels kind of squishy. He has no shield. He really just has an escape mechanism and a slight knockup, which doesn't provide anything after that. So not really good tank, a decent assassin. And overall, I would say wait a patch just to see if they buff him. I'm pretty sure they will, slightly, not a ton. It's not anything like pre-buff Yorick or anything like that. And he's definitely can be pretty fun, but I don't think that he is where he's going to stay for a while. So Riot will probably wait a patch, look at him, and then make some slight number tweaks, possibly give his Q a ratio, even if it's a slight bonus AD ratio, that would be good. And I think he would be in a decent place. He is really fun. You can pull off some crazy maneuvers with him with his W and actually escape some pretty awesome stuff, as well as being able to zip around with his E and then knock people up. It's pretty satisfying, although I just wish there was a little bit more steroid to his Q and to his R, base damage to his R rather, that made it better. You know, possibly reduce the amount of CC he receives, similar to Garen's spin, or make it knock it up another time after an internal cooldown if, you know, you're the only person he's trying to knock up, or the enemy's the only person rather. Those type of things would translate into an overall better experience playing Wukong. But if he's that type of champion like to play, you know, melee assassin type, you know, get in your face, hit you with a big stick, then yeah, try him out. But otherwise, if you're on the fence about him, wait a couple patches. Anyways, guys, this has been my first impression of Wukong. If you've enjoyed this or have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them down below, and I will try to get to as many as possible. I also wanted to quickly thank everyone here for hitting 20,000 subscribers on League Top 10. That is a huge accomplishment. Big pat on the back. This will not be my official announcement video of that, nor is my official thank you, but I did want to quickly add that into here. As always, guys, if you've enjoyed my content, please remember to like, favorite, subscribe if you haven't, all that good jazz. It helps, and I'm not going to say it really helps, you know, do it every time, etc. But yeah, it's always great when you guys do that, and I love you guys forever. So, Spunkify out. I'll see you guys later. Peace.